Well, that, of course, has to be the topic of my sermon, which is going to focus on size. And I'm not talking about thin, I'm not talking about fat, I'm talking about the size of the state. What controls us? Because, of course, we had the budget this week, and this was Jeremy Hunt's big chance to prove that he's a conservative, that he believes in high growth, low taxes, sensible regulations, that he believes in you, the people, being able to spend your money sensibly, trusting the individual to make the right decisions. This was his moment, and this is the man that just last July, that's not very long ago, is it? Just last July, he said exactly this. He said, what we need to do is to turn ourselves from a high-tax, low-growth economy into a low-tax, high-growth economy. That was in July 2022 when inflation was soaring, energy prices were actually, the wholesale prices were much higher than they are now. So the situation's actually got better. Inflation's now reducing, energy prices are reducing. And at that moment, Jeremy Hunt said that he wouldn't increase corporation tax. No. He was going to, as part of his leadership campaign, he would cut corporation tax, the tax on businesses, from 19% to 15% to get higher growth. Cut taxes. He said he would cut business rates in some of the areas that needed levelling up. He said that trust was a key issue. Well, people may have trusted him then, that he was going to do what he said. So here was his big moment. Did he live up to it? Did he honour that trust that he asked people to place in him? No. A few months later, he reneged on both pledges. He reneged. So how can we trust people? This is why trust in politicians is plummeting, because of people like Jeremy Hunt. The data is better than it was when he gave that pledge last summer. And yet, he reneged. He didn't even leave the corporation tax at 19%. No. He carried out Sunak's pledge to increase it from 19% to 25%. Public spending, ladies and gentlemen, that's government spending of your cash. It's not government cash. It's your money, is the highest ever in peacetime. Just think about that. The size of the state has grown relentlessly in the last decade. Who's been in charge? They used to be called Conservatives, but I created the new name that I think is more reflective of who they are, Consocialists. Yes, high tax, high wasteful spending, low growth. And here's the evidence, folks. The number of people working for the public sector is in the last decade 750,000 people higher than it was when the Tories came to power. And the number of people working in the private sector is some 600,000 people lower. And yet it's the private sector that creates the growth, the innovation, the entrepreneurship. You're not going to get much of that in the civil service, are you? So it's the private sector that creates the wealth and the revenues. We know that the number of people claiming out-of-work benefits, some 1.5 million more than pre-COVID. The size of the state now is some 30% higher than it was around 20 years ago. It's now about in the mid-40s of all GDP, about 45% of all GDP is government spending. This is utterly extraordinary. It's the highest since the Second World War. The Tories used to believe in a small state. Maybe you've given up on that too. I don't. I think it's absolutely right. I trust the people. Our corporate tax now on businesses at 25% is 20% higher than the EU average. We just left the EU, for heaven's sake, to be dynamic, to be able to cut our own taxes, get rid of our own daft regulations. And yet the EU average is 21%, and these buffoons in the Tory party have increased corporation tax to 25%. It'll actually raise less money, not more money. I'll be talking about that after the break with Patrick Minford. He knows a thing or two. And then if you think, well, I'm not so worried about corporate taxes for whatever reason, yeah, but very quietly, stealthily, they've been pickpocketing your back pocket. About 4p in the pound they're taking over the next few years by freezing the income tax threshold. So they're not lifting it in line with inflation. No, they're taking more money. What that means is, and this is where it's so utterly, utterly egregious, another 3 million people on the lowest pay will start paying income tax in the next couple of years. And another 2 million people on medium levels of pay, all of a sudden, will be paying the higher rate of tax that was supposed to be for the rich. It's all gone pear-shaped. Everyone in the next few years, all the data shows, will be worse off. And that's why it does matter, the size of the state. So what else have they done? Well, he says, don't worry, I've created some new rules on how you can put more expenses through the corporate tax calculations. But the truth is, all that does is create more complexity, more boxes to fill in, more forms to fill in, more things to tick, more boxes to tick. And then he says, yes, but don't worry, we can get more people back into work because I'm giving out some childcare vouchers. Well, A, the pace of those vouchers is going to take a number of years to bring in, but B, it's just more complexity, more boxes to tick, more forms to fill in, more things to claim. And you know what that means? Yes, it means more civil servants working it all out, checking you've done it properly. Yet more civil servants, over and above the 750,000 increase in recent years, because the Tories now think that Nanny State knows best. I'm not talking about Jacob Rees-Moggs' nanny either. I'm talking about all of the civil servants. They know best, apparently. You can't be trusted to spend your own cash. And rather than let families choose whether you want to be a mum looking after your newborns, your young children yourself, staying at home, you could, for example, be sharing your allowances. No, none of that. Nanny knows best. Nanny State knows best. And apparently it's better, according to Jeremy Hunt, that you give your children to nurseries for 30 hours a week during term time only. How are you going to get a job if you can only do it in term time? You see the complexities of all of this. So it might sound good on the face of it, but underneath, it's just Nanny State. The simple way to do this is to lift the income tax threshold dramatically. You let the individuals, you let families decide for themselves how to spend their cash, where to spend it, how to get the best value. You make work pay for everybody by lifting the point at which you start paying tax. That's the right way to do things. Lift the income tax threshold. Instead, no, we've got some bungling, boring, bowler-hatted bureaucrat who apparently knows more than mums and dads about how they should raise their children. If you increase the size of the state, it means more rules, more complexity, more civil servants. I think I want less bungling civil servants, not more of them, for heaven's sake. And this is exactly the opposite of what Brexit was all about, the Brexit opportunities of going for growth, of deregulating daft EU laws, not creating ever more complexity. Mr. Chancellor, unbelievable. Reducing taxes so you make work pay so that people can do their own things. You can lift people off the benefits trap. Oh no, Mr. Hunt, well, he has been listening to my speech at the beginning of the year, but he wants to get people back off benefits through really complex routes. Just lift the tax threshold, Jeremy. It's very simple. It's very, very simple. And all of a sudden, work pays. But no, they want to tinker and tweak and twiddle all of the complex dials. Let me remind you, any ideas how many pages the tax rules are, the HMRC tax rules are? At the last count, it was 21,000 pages and growing. And this budget will just increase it ever more. It's about 4 times the size of the combined works of Harry Potter. And a lot less fun besides. Just remember this. More complexity means more civil servants, more benefits packages, more pension schemes for the civil servants, more office space, more cost. It's your money, your cash. And you look at the budget, tens and tens of billions of pounds more on sickness and disability benefits. I mean, this isn't the wrong way to be going. We've got to be encouraging people back into work. It's all going wrong. And if our tax rate is too high, then it makes us less attractive for big businesses, for international investors, for international firms. Our tax rate now for companies is double our friends in the Republic of Ireland. Double. Where do you think you're going to set up your headquarters? It's not rocket science. It's not difficult. And the proof's in the pudding, Jeremy. Yes, AstraZeneca setting up a huge manufacturing plant in the Republic of Ireland. But you didn't learn the lesson, did you? You can't tax your way out of a crisis. We've got to grow a way out of it. And what you're doing here is creating a perpetual, vicious doom loop, spiralling ever downwards. You raise taxes, your tax take will go down, less people will come here, more people will leave. I'll give you another example. Back in 2017, when Donald Trump reduced their corporation tax rate from about 35% down to 21%, it massively increased, hugely increased their tax take, because companies came back, they onshored activity. All of a sudden, their tax take was 10% above their 10-year trend of tax receipts, hugely up. The proof's in the pudding, and yet our man in the Treasury has ignored it. And here's another point, a piece of evidence that proves my point. Wages in the UK now, with all these tax rises, wages, net of inflation in real terms, are lower than where they were 13 years ago. So that's the thing. That's why no one feels we're making much progress. It's completely different to in the 1990s, when real wages were going up nearly 3% a year for a decade. In France, real wages are up 10%. I know we lost the rugby to the French last week, but we shouldn't be losing it on economic grounds, for heaven's sake. We always criticise the French for having too big a size of state, and now we're up with the worst of them. Germany, their real wages up 20%. This is what's going on in front of our eyes. It's unbelievable. We're losing the economic competitiveness. It's an absolute tragedy. We've got to turn round. We've got to go for growth. We've got to cut taxes. The finances are fine. Stop worrying about the government's balance sheet. Let's go for growth, and then it will all sort itself out. That is the optimistic end to my Sunday sermon.